Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman in for Richard French. Tomorrow, the House of Representatives is set to vote on legislation that would create a bipartisan commission to investigate the Capitol riot. The deal was negotiated by the top Republicans and Democrats on the Homeland Security Committee. It's expected to get through the House, but could face a tougher road in the Senate. But the man on your screen right now, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, says he is definitely a no vote. McCarthy issued this statement today, quote, "The renewed focus by Democrats to now stand up an additional commission ignores the political violence that has struck American cities, a Republican congressional baseball practice, and most recently, the deadly attack on Capitol Police on April 2nd, 2021. Given the political misdirections that have marred this process," he writes, "given the now duplicative and potentially counterproductive nature of this effort, and given the Speaker's short-sighted scope that does not examine interrelated forms of political violence in America, I cannot support this legislation." But Liz Cheney, the Wyoming Congresswoman booted from House leadership by McCarthy and his supporters, says McCarthy has a lot of explaining to do and would need to do it if he's called to testify before a commission.
He absolutely should, and I wouldn't be surprised if he were subpoenaed. I think that he very clearly and said publicly that he's got information about the president's state of mind that day. I would hope he doesn't require a subpoena, but I wouldn't be surprised if he were subpoenaed.
It's not surprising that McCarthy might want to forget all about January 6th. He's been glossing over the riot for months, even though he initially denounced Trump for his role in the violence at the Capitol. We know McCarthy is worried about the party's image. Turns out he may also be trying to protect Donald Trump. CNN is reporting that one of McCarthy's biggest commission fears is that he will be called as a witness, and that under oath he might be forced to discuss the details of an angry call he had with Trump as the riot was taking place. On that call, which was confirmed by Washington Republican Jamie Herrera Butler, who was in the room with McCarthy during the call, McCarthy asked Trump to, quote, publicly and forcefully call off the riot. Mr. Trump replied by saying that Antifa, not his supporters, was responsible. When Mr. McCarthy said that wasn't true, the former president was curt, quote, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are." But if we can't even get a bipartisan agreement on a riot commission, how can President Biden and Democrats on the Hill get anything of importance done? How do we break through that partisanship and that blockade, or can we? To discuss that and more, we turn to former Senator Byron Dorgan, Democrat from North Dakota who served in Senate leadership for 16 years. Senator, President Biden continues to push for bipartisanship, continues to cite his history of working with Republicans, including Mitch McConnell. It's just not seeing a whole lot coming back in return. We all want bipartisanship, but is that even possible right now? And how would you counsel the president when it comes to leaning on Republicans to get badly needed votes?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, he has them at the White House. It seems to me much of politics is personal. You have them down, you talk to them, you describe what you're trying to get done and why, and hope that some of them will see what the benefit is to the country.
You know President Biden personally. There are some Democrats out there holding out hope that he's playing a long game here, giving the GOP a chance to block and block and block as they've been doing, so that he can then later turn around and say, well, we tried, let's now do it ourselves. Do you think that's his game plan? Do you think he has a backup plan if Republicans will not work with him?
Well, my sense is that he would like to find a way even to take a smaller piece of this infrastructure, get that done on a bipartisan basis, and then move on to the other pieces that he wants to add to that. But even at that, it's difficult because, you know, Senator McConnell has indicated that he really does not want Joe Biden to succeed, which is kind of a strange thing to say. He said that about Barack Obama as well. But let me also say to you that what happened just recently now, and the head of the Republican caucus in the House deciding that he really doesn't want to investigate what happened on January 6th. You know, you wonder, is there any bipartisanship at all when congressional leaders decide that they don't even want to investigate the attack on our U.S. Capitol? I mean, it's unbelievable to me. It's either a lack of intellect or a lack of courage, and I'm not sure which, but that is not leadership in my judgment.
And that's one of the components, I think, that has so many people so worried. And for Democrats, there are even more worries. I mean, we have the entrenched positions among Republicans, but then, you know, we have voting restrictions that are coming into place. Redistricting is going to happen soon. All of this could stack the Democrats against winning elections and getting fair representation, and it could stay that way for a long time. Don't Democrats have to figure out a way to break through this block on voting issues, if only for self-preservation, so they can win elections?
Well, you hope you can win elections by having people cast their votes and you count them, and those that get the highest number of votes win. We've had recent presidential elections when that's not been the case. You know, Donald Trump became president, and I think he lost by about 4 million votes, as I recall. Al Gore won rather, and George W. Bush lost. So, but the fact is, what the Republicans are doing now in state after state is trying to find ways to make it more difficult for people to vote, and creating circumstances that could very well tip the election. And Democrats need to be very concerned about that. That's why they're pushing hard for this bill called H.R. 1, which is election reform opportunities. You know, what we have now, that, you know, there's no bipartisanship in having President Trump out there talking about the fact the election was stolen from him. It was not stolen. That is a colossal lie. And yet half of the Republicans, when polled, say, we believe the election was stolen. So there's just a serious problem here of trying to find some bipartisanship in the Congress, in the House and the Senate, and do the things that are necessary to improve things in this country. Our country needs some action on behalf of leaders that can fix some issues that exist in our country, and yet not much is happening because of this lack of bipartisanship.
But if you can't get H.R. 1 passed, and you've got all of these restrictions that cannot be, they've already lost the fight on the state level in Georgia, in Florida, in Arizona, in Texas, and they're trying elsewhere. Doesn't that set it up so that, yeah, Democrats really aren't going to be able to win those states? The game will be even further rigged for Republicans. All the examples that you gave me of Donald Trump not getting as many votes in 2016 and George W. Bush not getting as many votes in 2000, they were both elected president.
Well, yeah, George W. Bush was elected president by the Supreme Court, and 5-4. And of course, Donald Trump was elected president because he won the Electoral College, but he didn't win the popular vote. But you're raising questions that I think are unbelievably important to the question the American people ask. Is all of this fair? Should the Republican Party in all of these states be attempting to decide to make it more difficult for people to cast their votes? They ought to be working to find it, make it make it easier for people to cast their vote. But that's not been the case. So you're asking the question, what do Democrats do about that? We have to have an aggressive fight to try to overturn what the Republicans are doing here, because what they're trying to do is rig the election or tip the election in ways that whoever gets the most votes may not be elected. That's a strange thing in a democracy.
So now I want to lean on your long experience in the Senate, as well as your role in Democratic leadership while you were in the Senate, because one of the biggest roadblocks on voting issues, and frankly the rest of the Democratic agenda right now, is Joe Manchin, a Democrat out of West Virginia. I don't know if you know him. Your Senate tenures did not overlap, but he's the only Democrat not co-sponsoring the voting rights bill. And there are other problems that not having his support will cause. So how can Democrats get Manchin to play ball? I'm sure you faced similar spots where there's one holdout on something in the Senate facing big political pressure at home. What would you do? What did you do in the past?
Well, I was part of the Democratic leadership for 14 years, and we had a time when the Senate was split 50-50. So we've worked through these things. Now, look, I know Joe Manchin. Joe's a good guy. Joe represents West Virginia, which is politically very different than New York or California. I mean, the politics of all these things. But I think the Democrats, we have a very narrow margin. In the U.S. House, it's a very slim margin. In the U.S. Senate, it's 50-50 and a vote by the vice president. So we just have to work through this and find ways to appeal to and talk to Senator Manchin and others. I mean, there are a couple of others as well. But the only power you have, the only potential power you have as a caucus in a Senate that is 50-50 is if you work together. And if you don't work together, you don't have the power, you lose the votes. So I'm not convinced that we won't be able to not only have Senator Manchin, but the other senators as well come to where we want them to be on H.R. 1. I think that is such an unbelievably important vote to cast because of what the Republicans have been doing ever since the election was held last fall. What they have been doing is trying to make it more difficult for people to vote, and that's especially the case with people of color.
You could certainly make the argument that those thin margins, that thin margin in the House and that 50-50 split in the Senate makes it even more important to get stuff done now because both chambers could be lost come in 2022. And there are so many key issues that Democrats want that are being backed up right now in Congress. Voting rights is one of them, but gun safety, police reform, immigration, LGBTQ protections, D.C. and Puerto Rican statehood. If there's a worry that Democrats could lose both chambers come 22, don't Democrats almost have to act now while they still have some chance of getting these things through?
Yeah. Look, our country deserves better. You've described a litany of things that desperately need to be resolved. We need to make judgments about them. We need to move ahead. And even if you don't get all that you want, you need to move towards a better solution, towards solving the problem. And what we see in the United States Congress these days is a whole lot of folks, both, I should say, in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, who reflect Donald Trump's vision of what's going on. And his vision is that the election was stolen, and he's going to, be a battering ram here to go after everybody that didn't vote to defer the election or whatever. So, look, what I'm saying is we have had to work through these things before in the United States Senate. You have to hope at some point the reason people ran for the office of the U.S. Congress or the U.S. Senate is because they wanted to do something that was good for America. And you hope at the end of the day you'll have enough people that believe that in their hearts. But, as I said, the decision today by McCarthy in the U.S. House, a leader, reflects either an unbelievable lack of intelligence or an even more unbelievable lack of courage by someone who is supposed to be a leader.
Can you think, Senator, of anything that breaks through that Republican incalcitrance, that gets through to Republican voters, maybe makes the party make a change?
Well, the american people will break through it. The polls show that the American people understand what needs to get done here and why. And so we'll see. I think there's a lot of pressure on the members of Congress going home, deciding we're not going to do anything. We'll just say no. The easiest vote in the world is to vote no. But American people want progress on these issues, whether it's infrastructure or voting or, guns, a whole series of things. They want progress, and they're getting precious little these days because we have a Republican a minority, I should say, a Republican minority that's decided that they want to stop everything. But the American people will have the final determination here. They'll decide. The American people can decide, who's doing the right thing and who's doing the wrong thing, and reward those that are doing the right thing by turning out and turning up and deciding we're going to throw the people out of office who have decided that they don't have any interest in solving the significant problems that confront this country at this point.
Byron Dorgan, former longtime Democratic senator from North Dakota, a phrase that has not been uttered in quite some time. Senator, no. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
And up next, a former federal prosecutor joins us to discuss the legal troubles surrounding Matt Gaetz, plus Rudy Giuliani's attempts to block prosecutors from using the information they got when they raided his home and apartment, and more.